Hi, and thank you for joining me. I'm continuing to have a quick look around New Zealand's wines, and today I'm looking at a Pinot Noir from Marlborough. This is Seresin's Rachel Pinot Noir, and it's the 2015 vintage of that. So quite a mature wine, which would be nice to look at. Seresin, quite an interesting winery, started in 1992 by Michael Seresin, who was a fairly notable cinematographer. They had their first vintage in 1996, and they've been something of trailblazers for organics and biodynamics in New Zealand for their time. They are certified both through BioGrow for organic wine and Demeter for biodynamic wine. So if all their wines are both organic and biodynamic. Not only that, but they make quite a large variety of Pinot Noirs. And I guess Pinot Noir, if you're looking to buy top quality Pinot Noir from New Zealand, people tend to think about Marlborough, the Wairarapa, or Central Otago as locations for that. But actually, increasingly, Marlborough, although it's well known for its Sauvignon Blanc, is producing some really quite smart Pinot Noirs. What we've seen over the last probably 10-15 years has been a move to plant more vineyards in the Southern Vales, which is where the Raupo Creek and the Tattoo vineyards that this come off both are, I believe. And these are places where there is a higher proportion of clay in the soils, richer, better suited to making red wines. Less frost prone as well. So yes, and the range of Pinots that Seresin make range from single plot wines, things like Sun and Moon that they're making the best years from just a single area, a couple of rows of vines on a hillside vineyard, to single vineyard wines. I've seen both the Raupo Creek and Tattoo vineyards as single vineyard wines. They make quality blends such as the Rachel, or they make a Leah Pinot Noir, and they make their entry-level Seresin Pinot Noir as well. So they're ranging from over $100 for the Sun and Moon through something like this, which would be $40 or so, down to about $20 for an introductory Pinot. So quite a breadth there. The approach to winemaking lies along the lines of the sort of the biodynamic and organic viticulture, in terms of that they will allow the wines to ferment with their ambient yeasts. So spontaneous fermentation goes on with those yeasts that have either come into the winery on the grapes or are already present from previous fermentations. The wines complete their fermentation, they run into French oak barrique. Generally, the proportion of new oak is very low. I've seen sort of 6 to 7, 8, 10, 12% on some of them. This one slightly exceptional with 25% of new oak, but still not particularly high. But then the wine stays in those barriques, in this case, for 18 months. So relatively long amount of time. So allowing not necessarily oak influence in terms of flavour, but more in terms of fixing tannins and allowing the wine to smooth out and settle a bit. The wine undergoes its malolactic conversion during that period, presumably again with ambient bacteria rather than being inoculated. And again, to try and make sure that the character of the wine makes its way into the bottle for you to enjoy, the wines aren't fined and they aren't filtered, and that means that they are vegan and vegetarian friendly, because there haven't been animal or dairy products used to remove tannins from them. So that's probably an advantage for some drinkers. The name Rachel evidently relates to the name of Michael Seresin's mother. So presumably this is a fairly favoured cuvée. I wouldn't think that you'd put your mother's name on something that you didn't approve of wholeheartedly. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First of all, as I say, I mean, it's an 8-year-old wine, and you can see from the colour it has some development. The colour is sort of it's a ruby red, but with more of a brickish red at the rim. It's not particularly dark or deep. I can see through it very, very readily there. It's not particularly staining the glass. I'm not seeing obvious tears flowing down the sides of the glass there. So let's have a look at the aromas. You know, nice big glass so that we can swirl it properly. And you've got a combination of a lot of tertiary developed aromas and an underlying rich, ripe fruit. The tertiary notes initially are very, very truffly, earthy, those sort of quite savoury notes there. Not in an unpleasant way. The truffle has sort of a richness to it. I guess at the back there's a slight note of oak. There's a slight touch of cinnamon or something like that, a sweet spice. And then the underlying fruit, as I say, it's got a ripeness to it. It's initially there's a burst of juicy red cherry, but it's more a sort of a plum to prune. Not quite to the developed extent of a prune, which has lost all its red character, but almost like a sort of a cooked, a baked plum or something like that. Still with some sharpness. So let's have a taste. A medium-bodied wine, quite fine, silky smooth tannins. They're certainly there. They're very present. Almost a slight sort of chalky drying note, but only very slight. In general, though, you've got a juicy red fruit underlying that. There's good acidity, so that's making my mouth the edges of my mouth. I'm salivating. Hence the sort of the cooked prune notes that I'm talking about there. I suppose there is some of that juicy red cherry there. There's also sort of a slight rhubarb, again reflecting that acidity there. And the acidity is keeping it alive, and it's giving it a good length. The weight is coming from a weight of fruit, and there's a warmth. The alcohol is only 13.5%, so it's not an alcohol burn. But that's certainly contributing to the richness of the mid-palate. In fact, the alcohol on the finish is very balanced, and it allows us sort of a delicate, slightly perfume, not necessarily a clean floral perfume, but more of that sort of red, cooked, stewed prune type note. It's quite lifted on the finish, and the freshness means that red fruit is lasting quite nicely. Again, slight dusting again of that cinnamon over the back palate there, but nothing enormous. There's not an enormous amount of obvious oak on the wine. So yes, probably a wine that is about at its optimum drinking. It might have just passed that, depending on how you prefer it. If you prefer a little more lively fruit, well then it probably isn't a wine for you. It's not a wine with a huge structure. It has good acidity. But I don't think the structure is sufficient for it to age much longer. I mean, it's an 8-year-old wine, so for an 8-year-old Pinot Noir, it's showing, of this sort of price, it's showing really quite nicely. Very pleasant drinking, some development. If you like a more developed tertiary forest floor style of Pinot Noir, that might be one for you. But yes, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found that of interest. Do join us again. Bye now.